What is the scariest thing you've ever seen in your life that you can't explain?
Once I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of my bedroom door creaking open. I could see the outline of someone standing there, but when I turned on the light, there was no one there. The door was still slowly closing, as if whoever or whatever had been there was leaving. Even creepier, my Nest fire alarm had illuminated in the corridor, sensing movement, but there was nobody there. Still gives me chills thinking about it.
Nest fire alarms are creepy. I got an alert in the early morning hours of cigarette smoke in my room. No one in my home smokes, and there wasn't an open window. It was my pawpaw's birthday, though, and he was a smoker till the day he died of cancer.
I had something similar happen to me. I had just gotten out of the shower, and we had to keep the window open because we didn't have a working exhaust fan. It was a high window. I saw a face in the window, and once I saw it, it slowly lowered itself out of view. It was so creepy.
I had a creepy situation happen when I was young. My parents left to go out shopping for some tools. I was probably in 8th grade at the time when they left. I distinctly remember them telling me that there were people working on our AC and that they should finish up before they got home. Well, I was playing, I think, COD 4 at the time, when I heard what sounded like pool balls banging together downstairs. Weird, but I thought, oh, well, maybe the AC guys found the pool table in basement and were just messing around. So I thought nothing of it. But it continued to happen for a little while, so I decided to just go investigate. As I'm walking down the stairs, I noticed that the basement door is only partially open and that the lights are completely off and that the AC guys are gone. My heart completely sank when I opened the basement door a little further. I don't know how to explain it, but it genuinely felt like I was staring down into that dark basement and that something or someone was looking back at me. I lost my shit and called my parents in tears at what had just transpired.
When I was like 12, I was having a sleepover with my buddy out in the living room. I went up to go to the bathroom and there was a woman standing in the hallway, and she just kind of faded out of existence. Sort of like when you see your own reflection in a window and you can like refocus your eyes and see through it. That's basically how it was. It was like my eyes refocused and she dematerialized. I ran back to my buddy and jumped into our makeshift bed and cuddled up with him and cried. When he asked what was wrong, I just said nothing because I didn't even want to say it out loud, lol. Was I hallucinating? Probably. But that was definitely a ghost, whatever a ghost is.
The basement in my dad's house is finished except for the storage room, which is really dark and creepy and is around the corner from the main room of the basement. There's an elliptical down there, and when standing on the elliptical, if you look over your shoulder, you can see half of the door to the storage room. I was working out on said elliptical, and I felt like someone was standing behind me, so I looked over my shoulder, and in that half doorway, a dark figure with light grey eyes was standing there looking at me. I was house-sitting, so I know there wasn't anyone else home. I slowly got off the elliptical and went into the bathroom to hide. Then a while later decided to be bold and rush past the storage room and back upstairs. Not the first time I had seen that grey-eyed figure either.
I would like to hear the other stories of the grey-eyed figure.
Well, the earliest I remember seeing it was when I was like 6, and I was at my grandparents' house playing in a room in which the large window was open without a screen. I looked up from my toys, probably Polly Pockets LOL, and it was perched on the windowsill just looking down at me. We just stared at each other for a while until I heard my dad outside my room, which made me turn to look to the door, and when I looked back, it was gone. I thought it had been a dream, or like an imaginary friend, but then I saw it again when I was older. And I was 18 when I saw it in my dad's storage room. If anyone is curious to know, it's kind of a humanoid shape, but shadowy and tall as hell. No face or hair, just light grey eyes. It's never spoken, but gives off a really weird vibe, like when you feel like you need to leave a place for no reason. Haven't seen it since the storage room, though.
I was riding my bike down a rural road when I was 9 and found a garbage bag filled with red sludge and white sticks. I thought it was blood and bones, but I had a very PG childhood, and I had never even seen pretend blood and bones, so I had nothing to compare to. I told myself it wasn't what I thought it was. After all, why would there be a ripped open garbage bag filled with blood and bones? 2 days later, I thought, look again. And if it is what you think it is, tell a grown-up. I biked back to the area and it was gone. I am now old and have watched enough to confirm it was blood and bones.
My partner and I went for a walk in a swampy park that a lot of people go to. Yet, that day, it smelled so bad on the trail, and we spotted an open black trash bag with blood and bones sticking out, and you could see how much it decayed. It was a dog carcass. We never went back to that trail since.
I found something similar not too long ago washed up in the canal near where I live. It looked like a dog skeleton tied in a bag. I called the cops to report it, but they didn't do anything. I think they called the canal management, whatever that's called, to deal with it. Either way, it is not a good feeling stumbling on a bag of bones. It feels like you accidentally wrapped yourself up in something really bad when you first realize what it is.
When I was a kid, my grandpa was the night shift custodian of a big old school church building. My sister and I used to go with him some nights because they had a big gymnasium-type room with a ton of big exercise balls and stuff, and it was fun to run around. One night, while my grandpa was locking up a room, my sister and I heard a noise down the stairs behind us. We looked, and there was an old lady leaving the building. She turns, looks at us, does the shh motion with her finger to her lips, and leaves. We don't think too much of it at the time. We go to my grandpa and ask him if there was anyone else here tonight, like any meetings, classes, etc. And he says, "Nah, it's just us in the entire building." We ask him where the door down the stairs leads, and he says, "Oh, that goes out to the cemetery." My sister and I freaked out. We still talk about it to this day and have the same memory of it.
About 25 years ago, my now former wife and I were caretaking a house. We had been there for several weeks, and we both noticed that we always had that feeling coming up the stairs from the cellar that something was going to grab you as soon as you turned the light switch off. Everything else about the house was normal. We slept with an analog wind-up alarm clock next to the bed, the kind that actually ticks. To set the alarm, you move a tiny third hand to the location on the clock face for the desired time. For example, halfway between 6 and 7, to awaken at 6:30. It's a physical process, and there is very little way to get it wrong. We always had the clock set to wake us up at 6 a.m. It was not something we fiddled with on a daily basis. One night, the alarm clock went off at like 2 in the morning, old school ringing bells. Both my former wife and I woke up absolutely terrified. I saw a small figure, maybe 2 feet tall, run out of the room. I thought I must have been crazy until my former wife screamed, "Did you just see that thing?" We both described it as some sort of small gremlin. When we looked at the alarm clock, we saw that the alarm hand had been moved from 6 a.m. to 2 a.m. That's the whole story. Scared the fuck out of me. Have no explanation for it. Nothing else ever happened there, but the cellar feeling persisted.
It didn't happen directly to me, but it happened to my dad while I was a toddler. My parents' bedroom and mine are connected by a long hallway. You could see directly into one other room just by staring at the door of the other. So we being kids, my brothers and me shared the same room. Our parents arranged their bed so they could lay in their bed and easily look across the hallway into our room. So one night, my dad stares into our room from his, and he noticed that from inside our room, on the top side of the door frame, some ugly dark face upside down like a lizard on a wall was peeping from our room, staring back at my dad across the hallway. He, being skeptic, thought he was just seeing stuff, until my mom asked, "Did you just saw that thing from the kids' room?" My dad instantly sprinted into our room, only to find nothing there. That only happened that one time, as far as I know.
My partners and I experienced something very similar. We kept hearing knocking on our front door and finding no one there. After a couple door checks, we were upstairs and heard banging inside the house. My boyfriend rushes down with a golf club, making loud threats to scare off a potential intruder. I hear him say, "Whoa, what the fuck are you?" And then, a few minutes later, he returned upstairs and tells me he saw a tiny potato-shaped man on spindly legs duck around the corner and disappear. Never had another incident.
Damn, I love stories like this. A friend showed me a video his colleague sent to him who'd been back home to Poland for a few weeks in the summer. In the video, no one reacts to this at all. They were all just chilling in the garden. But you can clearly see a tiny person, few centimeters tall, come out of the long grass near to where he sat and stab him with what looks like a pitchfork to scale with his size. They watched the video back and noticed it, and he had 3 small like pinpricks where they watched it stab him, but he didn't feel it, and no one saw it happen other than on the video. I really hope it's real.
When I was a teenager, my dad got very sick. We lived with other family members, so I shared a room with my parents. It was a temporary room, so the wall was just wood, and it didn't reach the roof, so there's like a space between the wall and roof. My parents slept on a bed while I slept on the floor by myself. There's just a temporary divider between us for privacy. When my dad was dying, there was this heavy feeling around the house. I wasn't the only one who felt it. My dad kept talking about a person always sitting on his shoulders. My dad mentioned a name and said that person had the same profession as him. My mum said they don't know anyone by that name. Every night before my dad died, I kept seeing this figure squatting on the space between the wall and roof. It was just always there and gave me the creeps. I just learned to ignore it and keep myself busy until I can fall asleep. When my dad finally died, the heavy feeling and the figure was gone. BW, my dad died at 3 in the morning.
I was maybe 10 years old, and my grandma had just died. I didn't really know her because she had spent most of my young life in a nursing home and often didn't remember who I was when I went to visit. But when I visited, she would always rub my back. It was sort of like an instinctual comfort thing. She did it to all her kids and grandkids. For about a year after she died, I would be sitting in my room at night, alone, and start to feel someone rubbing my back like she used to. It freaked me out until one night when I acknowledged it and said, "Thank you, Grandma." It stopped after that, and I never felt it again.
My mom died a couple years ago, and I was staying with my dad at their house for a few months to look after him, sleeping in her bed. Every night for months, as soon as I laid down, I'd feel someone sit down on the side of the bed. I knew it was her, and it didn't bother me. I'd cry myself to sleep because I missed her so much. Sometimes I'd talk out loud to her. Eventually, it stopped happening. I miss it TBH.
My grandma visited me after she died too. I had been thinking a lot about her and whether she knew how much I loved her and where she was, etc. Before I fell asleep, and it was early morning and light outside when I woke up to what felt like someone leaning on the bed on either side of me to tuck me in. I don't know how to describe it, but I knew it was her. The house was quiet. I was completely awake, but kept my eyes shut, and after a few seconds, she was gone. I've always been really scared of anything paranormal, but I was completely calm. Sometimes I wonder if I had opened my eyes, if she would have been there.
I was about to cross the street. A lady put her arm across my chest and said, "Wait." As I look at her, trying to figure out what is going on, a car crash happens, and one of the cars goes tumbling down the street 2 feet in front of me. If she hadn't stopped me, I would absolutely be dead. I turn to look at her again, and she is no longer there. I could see for blocks in each direction, know where she could have gone that fast where I wouldn't be able to see her. Only thing I can come up with is I imagined it happening in my memory due to how tragic the crash was. Never experienced anything even slightly supernatural before or after.
There is an effect in times where you may die where a seemingly very real person appears near you and gives you advice. Usually they disappear almost immediately after. It's very common for hikers climbing large, dangerous mountains. They will see some other hiker warning them that it would be dangerous or that they will die, and then they disappear seconds later. You may have experienced that.
This is called the third man factor. You can Google it and find different stories of people experiencing this sort of thing. There's one account of a guy who survived 9/11 against all odds and attributes it to someone leading him to right elevators and encouraging him to keep going down to get out of the building.
I had a double mastectomy, and my BP was very low. No one could stay overnight with me because of COVID. In the middle of the night, an old lady came in and held my hand until my nurse came to check on me at 4 a.m. I was not sleeping. I was in a lot of discomfort. I see the door open and the nurse comes in, and I look to my right, and the lady is no longer there. However, my arm was extended and clasped like I was holding someone's hand.
It's not scary, but unexplainable. When I was 10, I got into a motorcycle accident. I wasn't driving it. I was walking from school when a motorcycle hit me going full speed. I did see the motorcycle come, but I froze up and couldn't move. When it had hit me, I flew pretty far and remember someone catching me when I fell down. When I got up and looked around, I didn't see anyone, and witnesses told the cops I flew at least 6 feet and fell headfirst on the ground. My head was fine, just had a broken collarbone. Thankfully, my parents believed me when I told them.
My nephew, who was 10, was playing on the wires that secure a telephone pole. This was in the summer. Somehow those wires became electrified and he caught fire and the ground was burned. At the hospital, after a few days when he could talk, he said to his mum, "I saw your grandma in heaven and an angel took 10,000 volts for me."
Working in a nursing home for years during the night, and everyone always complained of weird stuff like noises on the top floor. I never believe in any of that, so I was always the one going upstairs to do night checks. One night, I was changing a resident on that floor with a colleague, and my colleague complained he heard something like people walking. We were in the resident room, and I had to go to the cupboard at end of that corridor to get bed sheets, and when I was coming back with the bed sheets, I kept hearing steps, and like if someone was touching and opening plastic bags. I was so annoyed and looked outside the room and saw a shadow passing the corridor. The issue is that the shadow was so big, like if literally a person just passed by, along with step noises and plastic bags. I freak out so badly and froze completely. I had to call another colleague to come upstairs because I was so scared of coming out of the resident room. Bear in mind that I do not believe in those things, and for 2 years I was always the one doing night checks on the top floor and bottom floor on my own. Never had any problem and never saw something. Since that day, I never went upstairs alone and was always very scared.
I have encountered a lot of strange things working at nursing homes too. My first job was in a nursing home that used to be a hospital. The old morgue was in the basement, but the door had been permanently locked since they converted it into the nursing home. The one time I had to walk by it on night shift, it was open when I walked back past it. Very unsettling.
I have a really crazy nursing home story too. I used to work night shift in a nursing home. One night, me and a bunch of CNAs were talking. One of them said, kind of off the cuff, "When I die, I'm haunting all you bitches." And we all laughed about it. Lo and behold, 3 months later, she is killed in a car accident. Everybody was absolutely devastated. She was really young, beautiful girl with almost platinum white blonde hair. I mean, it was very striking when you saw it. Weeks after she passed, and we have a patient in the room by the nurse's station who was actively dying. His family was with him. He had a daughter that was very devoted and would come in a lot. She came to the nurse's station, and I asked her, "How is everything?" She said her dad suddenly become very calm. He told her that this young girl with beautiful blonde, almost white hair has been coming in his room at night to sit with him and talk, and she kept telling him everything was going to be okay. The daughter wanted to know who this employee was.
My grandfather had just died a few days earlier, and my mom was crying one night in our kitchen. I started hugging her. We had a lot of my grandfather's belongings, but there was this broken radio that didn't even have working batteries in it on the table, along with other things like photos and clothes he previously owned. This is the only unexplainable thing I've ever experienced. But while my mom was bawling crying, the radio made a very loud static noise for about a second. We both stared in silence at it. It was eerie. She stopped crying because even she heard it. We both just went to bed after that and haven't spoke of it since. I'd imagine if it was something paranormal, it was my grandfather letting us know he's here. But who knows?
The day before my grandfather died, he told my brother and I that he'll be waiting at the bar to buy us a beer in the future. Skip ahead to about a month after his passing. I had a very short, felt like 10 seconds, very vivid dream of me walking into a bar I didn't recognize, and my grandpa being at the bar. He spun the chair around and had a beer in each hand. He just said, "You guys ready for that beer?" I looked right, and my brother was standing next to me. I snapped awake so fast, I scared the crap out of my wife and dog. I'm just panting, breathing, and freaked out. I went to check my phone to see what time it was. And as I picked it up, I got a text from my brother saying, "Hey, I just had a fucked up dream." Yeah, same dream.
My great-grandma's daughter died at just 14 years old, back in the late 1950s. One night shortly after the funeral, great-grandma was standing at the kitchen sink doing dishes when she heard a noise behind her. She turned around to see her daughter standing at the foot of the stairs. She said, "Bye, Mom," and walked up the stairs. Great-grandma went to the stairs and her daughter was gone. A few minutes later, great-grandma's sister called and said, "I don't want to upset you, but your daughter was just here to say goodbye to me."
Shortly after my grandfather passed away, my grandma went to bed one night, and just as she was dozing off, their wedding photo fell off the wall, and she swore until the day she died, 10 years later, that she heard him laugh and laugh when it fell.
I might have something for this. When I was young, probably around 10 or so, maybe younger, I was at a family wedding. It was late in the evening, so a full moon was out, and it was getting darker. Me and my cousin, who's a year younger, were swinging on this big metal gate thing outside the venue. It was on the entrance to a very, very big field. We noticed a guy very far into the field who was just glowing and radiating white. I mean, his skin, clothes, everything. I remember us standing there like WTF. Then we tried to get his attention and shout at him. He stopped, looked in our direction, but he stopped right under the full moon and pointed up towards the moon whilst staring at us. We were just in shock and confusion, pretty much. After about 10 seconds of pointing, he carried on walking across the field and just disappeared behind a swing set. Even till this day, I have no idea what that was. I'm hoping it was some costume or something, but sure didn't look like it.
Brought home a 3-foot-tall realistic doll my grandparents had with the intention of fixing it up. I'm scared of dolls, so I put it in a box and put a heavy metal box on top of it. Next morning, the doll was gone. The boxes were still in place, but the damn thing had disappeared completely. I live in fear.
I live in the countryside, and when I was a kid, every day I used to go check the chickens that we had in a hen house in the garden. It was around 8 p.m. in the winter, dark and snow everywhere. I put my shoes on and went outside. Everything went as usual until I saw it. There was somebody standing in front of me in the dark. Or like, I wish it was somebody. That figure was almost 3 meters tall and had red glowing eyes. I told my parents, and until this day, nobody believes me. Few years ago, I found out the previous owner of our house committed suicide in the same place in our garden, years before we moved in.
Apparently, this is a thing. I had this happen to me as a kid. I was about 4 or 5 and got up at night to use the bathroom. And when I opened the door, there were these 2 small creatures lighting matching while hovered over the toilet. They were dark figures with red eyes. I thought I was dreaming. Or it was my siblings, and I couldn't quite see. But Google says this is a thing.
Scaring the fucking shit out of me now. I've seen this too. Got up one night to go to the toilet when I was like 3 or 4 and looked down my hallway to see this large figure with scaly, burned black-red skin and red eyes quickly turn around and look at me. I still remember it so vividly.
I had a dream when I was about 6 years old. It was of an apartment, and inside was lots of ghosts and horrible, scary creatures. They then dragged me into a room, put me in a bin full of fire. When I turned 10, I moved 200 miles away with my dad to that same apartment from my dream. The fire bin room was my bedroom. That apartment was a literal hell too, as there were loads of drug addicts, etc. there.
Hate that. Used to have a horrendous reoccurring dream about this particular place I'd only ever seen in dreams. I now live just down the road from the actual building. What the hell?
My ex-BF crashed his motorcycle on my block, and as soon as it happened, I started running his direction. By the time I got to him, he was already gone. While squatting next to his body trying to figure out WTF just happened, I looked up and saw his spirit on the other side of him looking at himself. He then looked at me dead in my eyes and shook his head in disbelief. IDK, what happened? But that spirit hung around for a couple of weeks, and I had so many weird things happen afterwards. Sights, sounds, alarms going off in my house, ECT, truly a spiritual experience before and after his. It was fucking crazy and way too much to write LOLE.
When I was a kid, my sisters and I had an Ouija board and would play with it in secret. We kept it hidden in a closet in one of our rooms. Well, our family found out, so they broke the board in half and threw it away. Next day, my sisters and I found it intact in the place we kept it hidden.
I lived in a haunted cabin for a few months. Not weird noises haunted, like objects inexplicably flying around the room directly in front of my face. Haunted. Other stuff would happen too, like objects being moved to strange places. What's funny is my roommate and I would have people over who didn't believe we had a haunted cabin, and those people would witness the poltergeist stuff firsthand and freak out. It's all fun and games when the ghost is throwing a deck of cards at you and they fall all over the room. It's way less cool when the ghost chucks a kitchen knife. It was the only time in my life I've experienced something truly unexplainable, impossible, and I can't understate how reality-shattering that is. But it lost the scary factor pretty quick and became an annoyance.